And an identity-safe classroom is a place where everyone feels like they belong, like they're accepted, and they all have a sense that they have value and something to contribute, that they feel like the teacher and the other students appreciate them no matter what background they come from.
We got to the idea by realizing from the work that Claude Steele and his colleagues did on stereotype threat that one of the main thing that happens with stereotype threat is that performance becomes depressed because people are worried about how they are being seen because of some negative stereotype about their group and its relationship to the task at hand, like learning math or learning reading. So the idea was that if stereotype threat is something that's learned in the dynamics of the environment, could elementary teachers kind of prevent the development of that by the ways that they set up their classroom, the relationships in the classroom, their use of materials and activities that are very inclusive, their intention to think about the classroom every day from the point of view of the students, to see that what they're doing is actually meeting the needs developmentally, cognitively, and emotionally for children in the classroom. So this is the name that we've given to a year-long research that we did to discover if it matters what teachers do in the classroom, especially for kids of color and others who have negative stereotypes related to academic, but it also turned out to help all the kids, which is even better. The notion of identity safety is based on the results of the research that we did for a year in 84 classrooms. We went into the classrooms 3 times over that year and documented everything that was going on in there to see what mattered and what didn't. Maybe nothing would matter, or maybe everything mattered. And we discovered through these observations that occurred that there was a constellation of things that seemed to make a difference and that had strong outcomes for kids. The 2 outcomes were that the kids in what we now call identity-safe classrooms, where more of these behaviors, components of identity safety were happening, the kids performed better on their SAT-9 test than kids in lower identity-safe classrooms. And very importantly, on the student questionnaire that we developed for them, the kids in higher identity-safe classrooms liked school more, they were more motivated, they were interested in challenging work, they felt like they belonged, they'd rather be in their class than another class, etc. Kid-based language. So we saw that it made a difference what the teacher did in the classroom. You know, teachers will say, oh, I've got a bad class this year, which can be true, but the point is, what do we do with them? You know, how do we turn them into a good class? So one of the things that has struck me for years and years now is that when we are talking about schools, strategies for schools and schools for kids of color and low-income kids, we always come to harsh discipline, militaristic, like moving kids around, remedial kind of curriculum, very authoritarian type ways of being in the classroom, and everything that says, you're not quite right, but we're going to fix you. And if you think differently about what you would want for your child, and so I think what's most revolutionary about our work is the idea that what the kids of who are in more stressed situations from income and bad neighborhoods and so forth, and who may not have been well prepared to start kindergarten and first grade, that the very same things we want for our own children, whoever they may be, is what we should do for all children.
Creating environments of equal status for all students shifts the tone in the classroom. And often kids are broken up into groups there. You know, we talk about the red group, the blue group, this reading group, that reading group, and environments are created where some students feel like they have a lower status than the others. So by creating this identity safety, you're creating an environment where each student feels a sense of value and where their status does mean something to them and to the other students.
One of the big ideas that we discovered by our observations over the year of these 84 classrooms is the powerful negative effect of trying to be colorblind. That one of the because we're really not colorblind. Nobody actually is colorblind, especially people who think they are not being colorblind, because it's a good goal. We think that being aware of race is a bad thing, and we're trying to sort of turn that on its head and say, no, being aware of our differences is a good thing and a powerful thing, and it's a tool for learning. So we want to go away from saying, I treat every kid the same, to saying that I'm trying to meet the needs of all kids, but some kids need different things than others. So helping kids deal in this very complex world with difference, with racial, ethnic, religious, gender identification, with these issues. There's no place that anybody is doing it. If we don't do it at school, the kids are not going to be able to deal with it. And so we talk about intentional use of our identities, making our identities a good and meaningful and challenging and interesting thing. It's not just a celebration. It's not just about self-esteem. It's about who we are, what we know and can do, and valuing those things in the classroom as a basis for later learning, continued learning.
And when we do that, we specifically try to avoid the stereotypes that sometimes come out when people are trying to do multicultural education in a way that takes groups and stereotypes them. We talked about teachers getting to know their students individually in a way that would allow the classroom to be a place where they bring forth their culture rather than we tell them what their identity is or who they are. And so it's a different approach. It's less about what they call heroes and holidays, and it's more about bringing forth who's in that classroom and letting the students really share from their own experiences and valuing that.
You know, often people say that in early childhood people teach children, and in middle and high school they teach subjects. You know, I'm a math teacher, I'm an English teacher. And we're trying to really elicit even more of that, teaching someone, who do you know? Becki and I were just talking about examples where kids are in difficult situations. So Mother's Day is coming up, and you know, it's normal to make a thing about it and to make something for the mothers and so forth. Well, what about the child whose mother has left home or something? So that doesn't mean we don't celebrate Mother's Day, but if you know your children, you could know that this is going to be a special event for a child like that, and you have to work with the child to say, there's somebody really important in your life that helps you every day. Let's make something happen there. So it's those kinds of awarenesses of the kids, not in a pitiful way, not in a make-do way, but in a very, just as you would with a friend or a family member, you accommodate what's going on to meet their situation. You think about how this is affecting them first. Step one can be greeting the kids at the door, remembering their names, starting to talk to them, getting to know them, having a trusting relationship, showing them how to do it. It's like if you need to go to the restroom, we're talking early childhood here, but giving them the autonomy, that tells kids a lot about what you think about me. I can come and go. We have our little signal or whatever it is that the teacher sets up for safety and happiness. But those kinds of things that are based on relationships and trust and hard work that is meaningful, not unmeaningful as too much is, and dealing with when trouble happens, as it's always going to be, that we deal with the trouble in a way that brings the children's ideas into it and helps them solve the problem, because then they will learn how to be with other people and to disagree without killing each other.
Once I heard about the research that Dorothy did, I was very excited about it. And working as a curriculum director at the time, I wanted to translate it into descriptive language that teachers could use. When you say, what are the strategies, there's one thing that a set of research strategies gets listed, and others, what does it look like in the classroom? So we took it and we divided it into 4 categories to make it easier for teachers. Remember, we call it the 4 C's. So the first C is child-centered teaching, which includes classroom autonomy, students learning to be independent, student voice and listening to student voices, developing a cooperative students, which is more than just cooperative learning. It's learning to cooperate all day long learning to get along, learning to collaborate, and it's teaching for understanding. Because even though that's not about what you might think when you think of social emotional skills, it's part of identity safety. It's part of being able to be successful in school, is to really understand what you're learning. So that's the category of child-centered teaching. The next category is classroom relationships, and we break that into teacher being available to students and building positive relationship with students, as well as positive relationships among students. And you can imagine there's so much that's held within those two. And on some levels, people might say, well, of course, we know that. But on other levels, we need to, it's one of the most important aspects of education.
And it doesn't happen very much.
And often is forgotten. The third, and also classroom relationships are relationships that also have high expectations for students. Mm-hmm. So it's not enough to care about the students. As Geneva Gay would say, you have to really make sure that they're successful. Then the third area is cultivating diversity as a resource, which by calling it diversity as a resource, it's showing the value of differences in diversity and the fact that we're not creating a colorblind classroom, that we're highlighting and celebrating and asking students to learn about each other's differences. It's also high expectations and rigor. So it's not enough to have high expectations, but we really want rigor. We want students to develop that grit that really gets them to push forward. And then challenging curriculum comes into that as well, because in contrast to what's happened so much over the last years, that students have been learning rote learning, the curriculum hasn't been challenging. And then, of course, things slide in the opposite direction. Kids misbehave because they're bored, as well as they don't develop those high-level thinking skills. And then the fourth category we call a caring classroom environment. And that's looking at the whole environment, how it goes together. It's everything from what's on the walls. Do the kids see themselves reflected on the walls? Which doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a picture of Martin Luther King in every classroom. It means have pictures of the students themselves, their families, pictures of other leaders from all different backgrounds, not always the same ones every time.
So my analogy is that teaching is like being a parent. You don't decide, oh, I'm going to focus only on their nutrition and their spiritual development or their physical development, that the complexity of being a teacher is the same as being a parent, and that one does not happen without the other. You are not going to successfully teach a child math or reading or chemistry or anything if they're having questions about their own sense of well-being in the classroom, if they don't feel valued, if they don't think they're smart, because everything is saying that they're not, like they're in the wrong reading group, they get in trouble more often, et cetera, et cetera. And there is no separation. If you think about yourself as a grown-up going to work every day, you realize that you want to feel welcomed, you want to feel comfortable, you bring in your own coffee mug because it makes you think of home, you try to get an office with a window. We all want to feel comfortable, that we are valuable, that it matters, and then we can get to hard work.